Hi there, my name is Joel, and today I'm going to walk you through writing your first health alarm for Netdata. Now, why might you want to do this? Well, the rich visualizations and per second metrics that you get with Netdata might not mean a whole lot if you don't know where you should be looking or that anything is going wrong with your node to begin with. And that's why Netdata has a built-in health watchdog that will notify you when certain metrics are doing things that they shouldn't. Every Netdata installation comes with a lot of pre-configured alarms for systems and applications, but once you get to a certain level of complexity with Netdata, you're going to find situations where you simply need a new alarm that is custom to what you're running. So what we're going to try to do today is make that as simple as possible, give you a solid example to work from, and point you toward how these new alarms propagate through the Netdata universe. So let's get started. All right, so to create this health alarm, let's go ahead and navigate over to the Netdata config directory for this system. And what we're actually going to do first is we're going to create a new file for this health alarm. So we're actually going to use touch, and we're going to create a file in the health.d directory, and we're going to call it cpuusage.conf. Now, by initiating the file first, we can now edit it using edit config, which is the preferred way to edit configuration files for Netdata. And if you're not sure what the config directory is or edit config, check out the description for some links to documentation that will help explain that to you a little clearer. We're just going to try to steamroll ahead here on how to build this alarm itself. So go ahead and initiate the file. What I want to do here is to create a simple alarm that measures and alerts on CPU utilization. So we're going to go through this line by line and try to make sense of everything that we're putting in here. So to start, we're going to create an alarm line. And now this is basically like the title of the alarm that you're creating. So this will show up in the Netdata dashboards, and you'll be able to, or in notification methods, and it will help you immediately identify which alarm is being triggered. Next is the on line, and we're going to attach this to the chart with the system CPU context. Now, if context is something that doesn't mean much to you, let me show you exactly where you can see the context for any chart. So actually this right here is this total CPU utilization chart is the one that we're going to work with today. And you can see the context right here after the title in parentheses. So it's system.cpu. And you can see that the same with every chart available. Like let's look at some MySQL charts. This is how you attach an alarm to a specific chart. Move that back out of the way. So as I said, we're attaching it to the system.cpu chart. Next up is the lookup line. Now this is the most complex one. It's where all the magic happens. We could probably make a whole video on all of the different lookup options, but for now we're gonna stay really simple. We're gonna say we're calculating the average over the last 3 seconds of metrics on the system CPU chart. We're going to take the metrics as a percentage, and then we're going to say we want to attach this alarm to 2 dimensions. And so we're creating a lookup for each dimension, which are user and system. So basically what this is going to do at this point is that the health watchdog is every 3 seconds. Actually, sorry, that's wrong. We're going to cover the how often it runs in a second here. But when it does run, it's going to take the average percentage of the last 3 seconds of the user and system dimensions on this chart, and it's going to calculate those, and then it will compare that to the thresholds that we'll set up in a second. So let's move on to the units line, which we're going to say is a percentage again. That's what's going to show up in the alarm itself. It's just helps you clarify that we're working with percentages and not absolute values or anything like that. Now here is with the every line is where we specify how often we want the health watchdog to run this alarm and make sure that it's not being triggered. So that we're going to run it every 10 seconds. And finally, we're going to set the thresholds for this alarm. So first we'll set a warning with the warn line, and we're going to say if it's greater than 50%, that's going to be considered a warning, and at crit, we're going to say greater than 80%. Now you see this variable here. That is a variable that refers to the number calculated by the lookup. So that's going to be different for every health entity that you write. It can be very complex. There's a lot of additional advanced ways you can use variables in alarms, but for the sake, we're going to say we're just calculating this average percentage. If that is over 50, it's a warning. If it's over 80, it's a critical situation. And this is going to apply for both of these dimensions. And last but not least, let's add an info line. And this is basically just a description of the alarm itself. Again, that will show up in the dashboard so that you can see immediately and understand what kind of alarm it is that you're looking at and what you might want to do next. So we're just going to say CPU utilization of users or the system itself. This could be a great place to actually document your own alarms and create potential troubleshooting or root cause processes in the alarm itself so that you or someone else on your team can quickly react to any alarms that you see in the Netdata Agent or Netdata Cloud. Last but not least, we're going to go ahead and reload that Health Watchdog's configuration to include this new CPU usage alarm. And you don't need to restart the entire Netdata daemon to do that. And you want to avoid that as much as possible just because it will create gaps in metrics collection. So in order to reload the health files specifically, you can run the Netdata CLI. You'll probably have to use sudo, and then you can use the reload health option to go ahead and do that. And we've now activated this new CPU usage alarm. All right, so what I'm going to do now is actually open up the local dashboard running on the node itself so that I can show you that this new CPU usage alarm is active and ready to roll. So you can go ahead and click on the alarms button here in the dashboard. And under the all tab here, you can see all of the running alarms. And these are organized by the chart that they are running on. So you're not going to see a separate panel here for the new alarm that we just created. You're going to find that under the system CPU list, and we'll scroll down a bit and we can see here we've created 2 running alarms based on the one file that we created, and we're looking at the CPU usage of user and CPU usage of the system, and you can see both are very low. They're not a problem right now. We're going to go ahead and fix that in a second. All right, so now we're looking at my space in Netdata Cloud, where I have the node claimed that we have just been working with and added that alarm to. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to that node in particular. There's a couple of ways you can do it. Let's use this for example. You can hop down into this list and view single node dashboards from here or from anywhere in the composite charts in the overview. So I'll go ahead and jump into the MySQL node. We'll open up this node's specific dashboard with its own metrics. And I can run some pretty basic stress tests to cause a lot of CPU stress on the system and hopefully trigger these new alarms that we just created. And then we can see how they propagate through the entire system. So to create a stress on the user dimension of CPU, we can run stress ng -c-l60. Go ahead and do that, and you can see it's dispatching what they call hogs, and it's just going to create a lot of CPU utilization. We'll be able to see that right away in Netdata Cloud, a big spike in the user dimension in particular. You can see here now it's hovering in the 60s, low 60 range. And we can hop over to the local dashboard here and see that this alarms has fired up. Let's look at the active alarms, and you can see here that the system CPU, the CPU usage alarm that we created is triggered for the user dimension, and it's telling you exactly where it is at the last time it ran. So that's awesome. And then, of course, we can see the same alarm in Netdata Cloud. We can see the chart that it's on, the name of the alarm, the value that it's recorded last, and that it's a warning. And if you want to, you can view alarm info for a little bit more information. Let's go ahead and do another stress test, but let's focus on the system dimension this time so we can see that alarm fire off as well. What we're going to do is run stress-ng fork 2, and this is going to create a lot of system stress. Go ahead and hop back over to Netdata Cloud, and if we select just the system dimension, we can see we're creating a lot of CPU utilization. And if we go over to the local dashboard, we should see the alarm already created for CPU usage on the system dimension, which is awesome. You can see just how quickly that happens, which is great when you say that you want to take just the last couple of seconds of metrics and you run the check fairly often. We'll go ahead over into Netdata Cloud and we'll see the alarm here as well with all of the info that you could need to figure out exactly what's going on, go to that node, start solving the problem. Of course, the problem in this case is running a stress test, so let's go ahead and cancel that and return this node back to a normal state. So now that you've learned how to create a very basic health alarm, you've really empowered yourself to do a lot of really interesting and powerful things with Netdata. You can create new alarms with interesting thresholds. You can edit existing alarms to change them based on your exact configuration. You can, create things, new alarms for things that we haven't even covered yet in the pre-configured alarms. So down below, there will be links to documentation for what all of the options are for creating health alarms, all of the different lookup options, the different templates, the wildcards that you can use, the variables, the hysteresis you can add in to prevent alarms from flagging or turning on and off repeatedly. There's a ton of opportunities, and I really hope that we'll be able to cover some of those in the future on this channel. So until then, happy monitoring.